So hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today, The Complete Guide to Understanding Email Deliverability for Your B2B Organization. With us today, you have myself, Ariana Shannon, the Director of Marketing at Sales Intel. I will be today's moderator as we have this discussion with Raj Kira, former CEO of MailerMailer, and Jason Hubbard, Head of Growth at Astronomer, I believe. Did I get that right, Jason?
Yep.
Awesome. Both of these gentlemen have massive amounts of experience in the space, as well as email marketing as it's grown and kind of really evolved into this monster that we're trying to work with. So with that, we'll get into today's agenda, which is at the very high level, getting technical. How does email marketing actually work? And more so on the deliverability side of that. What happens after you push send to your potentially tens of thousands of people? What impacts your org's deliverability? How to avoid email blacklists, how to protect your domain reputation, and then of course that live Q&A, because you can't possibly cover everything in this topic in 30 minutes, but we're going to do our best to make sure we're getting the highlights for you. So with that, we'll go ahead and start with how does it actually work? I know I can speak to this a little bit more. I have been deep in a guide that we've been making, but Raj or Jason, do you guys want to jump in on this one?
Raj, you're probably more technically involved on this side, given your experience at MailerMailer. So it's probably best for you to take the lead on this one, I would think.
Yeah, happy to share the insights about how it works, because there's so many nuances to this. So in years past, I'd built a company called MailerMailer. It was acquired several years ago, which is why I'm no longer the CEO of it. I sold the company, but we used to send out over 1 billion emails on behalf of our customers every year. Lots of nuances in terms of deliverability. So typically what happens is you hit send, then it goes off to your intended recipient. So when they get the message, it doesn't always go straight to their inbox. There's lots of layers that it goes through first. And the first thing that most recipient servers do is they check the major blacklists. The big granddaddy of all blacklists is called Spamhaus. Spam, H-A-U-S. And if you get on Spamhaus, it is it's hard to get on it. Second, it's hard to get off of it. And so you want to follow best practices for sending, which we'll talk about here as well. The other things are the email could bounce back for numerous reasons. And so there's something called email bounce codes. And Sales Intel has just put out a new guide that documents what all these different bounce codes are. And it provides information such as what's the 554 error, what's this error, what's that, how do you find what the error is in terms of it bouncing? So those are just some of the nuances. And then based on those policy decisions inside the recipient's servers, which could be Gmail. If you're using Gmail makes its own decisions. It will either accept the message, decline it completely, might mark the message as spam. If you're using Gmail, you're familiar with the promotions folder. So oftentimes any kind of marketing messages will get put into there. Transactional messages will get put into your updates folder. So there's lots of nuances. So we'll go into some of the greater granularity of these in a few minutes, but that's just the gist of how it works. There's lots of layers it has to pass through before it actually gets to the inbox. And there's lots of things that can happen along that path.
Yeah, I would say the primary additional thing to add here is there's multiple layers to this. So there is the layer of what happens, deliverability, or whether a message gets accepted or not at the at the provider level. So like Gmail, Google being an example of it. Then it can be at the organization level, and then it can be at your own individual inbox level. So it can be rejected or routed to spam or whatever at different levels within that. And that's the reason why, like on your own individual inbox, you have the ability to go into your spam folder and mark something as not spam. That helps train your inbox to be able to say, like, I don't want to mark this stuff as spam, even if everybody else at your organization or everybody else that company or that person emails is going to have it marked as spam. But then that data, that feedback that you're giving that this is not spam also goes back to those additional layers to give signals that, hey, you may be incorrectly flagging this. And so it's important to understand there are multiple different layers to this, and it's important to be able to try and distinguish or figure out where the problems may exist, because the way to correct it can be different depending on where you're running into the issues.
No, and that's a great comments, guys. From where are you getting blocked? Is it at the spam house or the email service provider, the ESP level? Are you getting blocked there? Are you getting blocked by the company level, the spam elements, or by the individual? So just to recap a lot of what you're going into. And let's go ahead and jump ahead into what impacts your overall email deliverability.
So I'll take a first crack at this one. So when you are sending messages, depending on what you're sending from, you'll have a different interaction with your recipient. So for example, if you use HubSpot to send your marketing messages, HubSpot's already got their IP addresses, their servers whitelisted by most recipients. And so typically when they send the messages out, they start to monitor things like how many addresses are bouncing. And if you get above an 8% bounce rate, they'll shut you off right away, because what they know is more messages you send that bounce, they could be dealing with a bad list, or guys, in worst cases, like an actual spammer, and so they have to be really careful about their sender reputation. So you have to be mindful of what they call batch and blast situations. If you're sending email from your own Gmail, think of this. Gmail was designed for one-on-one personal interactions. They stop you from sending more than 100 messages in a day. But when you do send messages, if they start detecting that you're sending the same message over and over to different people, they'll think of you as, whoa, wait a minute, somebody's using Gmail to send bulk email, and they may stop you completely from sending messages too. So avoid sending the batch and blast from your Gmail accounts. The other thing that they look for is hard bounces versus soft bounces. Again, the guide that I mentioned has got all the different codes to it. And the hard bounces are typically when the address doesn't exist and you get that back. But you have to be really mindful about how many messages of the same kind that you send out at once, especially to one particular organization. I'll give you an example. If you send a one blast to new people who have not received messages from you in the past, and it's the same message, and somebody in the recipient's company says, whoa, I'm starting to get spammed here, and they click report spam, and so does someone else, that gets reported to the recipient's IT department, so to speak. So that might not be a department, it might just be a server that handles everything. But once it's reported, they say, oh, wait a minute, look at all these other messages, they're identical, they're spam too. And they suddenly block it from being delivered to other people. I've seen situations where something was in someone's promotion folder or inbox and actually then got rerouted to their bulk folder just because of those policy types of decisions. And the last thing on the list is spam traps. These are addresses that that ESPs, other organizations know to be addresses that will never sign up for a list, that should never be sent to email. So sometimes what I've seen happen is Hotmail, Yahoo, what they do is cycle through old addresses. So if somebody hasn't used their Hotmail account or a Yahoo account in a year, they'll repurpose the address and make it available to somebody else. Or what they'll do is, in some cases, take an address and say, okay, if we get email to this, it's going to be spam because someone hasn't used it in a long time, or something related to the address that it shouldn't be getting messages. If you send messages to these spam traps, that's a bad thing, because that's how you get onto these lists like Spamhaus and other places, and they maintain these lists too. So it's best practices to send to addresses that you should be sending to and send personalized messages. Jason, you've probably got some additional commentary on things that you've seen happen as well.
Yeah, I mean, first off with the spam traps, I mean, those are a nightmare because it is the quickest way you will absolutely destroy your domain reputation, your ability to send. It is really hard to fix. Also, if you wind up with one, like, it's really hard to tell definitively if that's the culprit or if something else is. It's virtually impossible to tell what email address is the offending email address. So it makes it really hard to then go cleanse your system, because you've got to typically go a lot wider than you would want to just to make sure you got rid of the thing. And it's really hard, given the damage that you've done, to be able to tell definitively, did you get rid of it or not? Because it's going to take a while to recover that. additional things, beyond email balances and stuff like that, you absolutely have to stay on top of what is your domain reputation. So Postmaster Tools by Google is a free tool, easy to add in, just update some DNS records and get that added in. There's also a lot of services out there that you can pay for, that will allow you to be able to do, IP health monitoring, as well as domain reputation, stuff like that. There's also some tools. Glock Apps is one that I've used in the past, where they maintain a list of email inboxes that they monitor, and so then you can send to that list of inboxes, and they'll give you a report on, did you land in spam, what folder did you wind up in, all kinds of stuff like that. So a lot of granular detail on it, and helps you be able to diagnose, like, is your problem, IP related, domain related? Is it specific to, like Google or Microsoft, or, one of the other services? It helps you to be able to go in and determine exactly where your problems are. Other big things, though, that are really critical to it, monitor and stay on top of your open rates. Anything open rate wise that's below the mid-teens should set off alarm bells. In general, best practices would be to try and keep your open rates well above 20%. Click-through rates of below 5%, and particularly when you start getting into the low single digits, that, of course, this is an assumption that your email has primary CTAs and links for people to click on. Obviously, if you're sending simple text emails that don't have links, then you're not going to have a lot of clicks. But those types of emails, like if you don't have good open rates, you don't have good click rates, these are, besides the really clear things like bounces or sending to spam traps, these are the primary things that are going to determine the health of your sending, and be able to, and the primary things are going to set off alarm bells and get you tagged as a spammer, get you blacklisted, get you with a bad domain reputation, stuff like that. And so if you're somebody, one of the best tricks of the trade, if you're somebody that's fairly aggressive about who you're sending to, so, heaven forbid, you're not sending to just a complete opt-in list. You may be sending to unsolicited emails and stuff like that. The thing that's absolutely critical to do that and do that effectively is to, one, load people in batches, in small groups, so that you're minimizing the amount of those. So you don't want to typically send to a list like that where that's all you're sending to. But also be very, very aggressive about whittling those people out. So if you send a few emails to, a list like that, and they've not opened anything, then get them out of there. Don't keep sending to those people, because that will burn you over the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. That goes back into the batch and blast elements of just what are you doing, and how are you treating the data that you have. So we'll also go ahead and get into some of this, because you guys have covered this a little bit. And on the right, we have some screenshots from that guide that Raj had mentioned, where we talk about deliverability and the error codes. I'll make sure that that's in the recap email for everyone, so that way you've got access to that document. But yeah, so also going back into what are the actual causes of those bounces that you all had mentioned earlier at the email service provider, the Googles, the Microsoft offices, the company levels, and the personal levels. What happens when something bounces back?
Raj, I'll let you take first pass at that.
Yeah, well, typically what you do is, I'll show you how to find this information inside a Gmail account. So let's say somebody's message didn't go through. You got a message reply that said it bounced. In Gmail, there's little 3 dots on your inbox. You click on the 3 dots for that particular message, and it will show you to show original. I think that's the word they use, show original. When you do that, it shows this huge long gobbledygook text, and in there is going to be a number that says the bounce code. It's the error code. And so you want to look at that number. It's a 3-digit number. It could be one of these. Oftentimes you'll see one that starts with a 5. And then you can look it up in this little table that we've got, and it shows you how to actually get the what the answer is, like, why did it bounce. The challenge with some of these is, I've seen email servers that have been misconfigured. I've also seen bounce back codes that give you some degree of information, but not 100%. So yeah, so that's one of the things you can do in terms of like what how to determine what the message is. To Jason's point, there are spam filters that are so sophisticated that you may get blocked at a company level, and large enterprises tend to do this much more so with HTML messages. I've seen much higher deliverability with text-only messages for enterprise accounts. So if you're sending to a large bank, they've got filters. They just don't accept these HTML messages. And in terms of the personal level of filter, if you're the kind of person that opens up a lot of promotional messages, Google knows that, or Microsoft knows that, and they will continue to send more of those to you. If, on the other hand, you never open them up, you delete them without even just looking at what the subject line is, they detect that as well, and they will start routing the same message to your bulk folder. So they personalize it for that. Just before we hop on over to Jason for further comments on this, I want to just answer a question David Goldman had about, it's a really good question. He said, if I essentially send the same message to 10 people at a client using regular Outlook, and the message is 90% the same, except maybe the top part, which is Dear Tom, Dear John, so on, maybe customizing it for their role, is that recorded as a duplicate message? But the great follow-up to that, David, thank you for clarifying, is that you send one message per day for 10 days, not all 10 in a day. If you sent all 10 in a day, it'll probably get flagged. You do one per day, most likely it will not get flagged. So I hope that addresses your question.
Yeah, and the other piece to add to it, and I was talking about that before we jumped into it, but what we're talking about as far as rules and engagement and stuff like that, take it all with a grain of salt because it's a moving target. So how Google and company are going to look at or handle something like that specific example, that may be the way they do it today. It may not be that way tomorrow. Classic example of that, it used to be if you were sending emails from your own personal inbox, it was really hard to get that your personal inbox, whether you're doing it just one-offs from Gmail or BCC and a bunch of people are using a sequencing tool like an Outreach or a SalesLoft or something like that. It was really hard to get your individual inbox, your individual email address flagged as a spammer. Like you had to do a lot of stuff and be pretty egregious about it. A few years ago, predominantly because of the popularity of sequencing tools like Outreach and SalesLoft, they started really hammering people leveraging tools like that and sending small scale basically individual marketing automation campaigns using sequencing tools like that. And so just as for a long time now you've had to warm your IP, you've had to warm your domain and be able to work your way up to being able to send volumes of emails. It's now the same way, even all the way down to people's individual inboxes. So if you manage like an SDR team and you're onboarding people and adding them immediately to Outreach or SalesLoft or some other sequencing tool like that, and you're having them immediately start sending at scale, you're going to see their inboxes get blocked. Where they can't even do it at an individual level. And so it's a perfect example of that ongoing arms race where the rules are constantly shifting and changing and you have to stay on top of it. And then one of my absolute favorite stories, it's a favorite story now, is absolutely hell going through it. Whenever I started my growth marketing agency, my very first client, I onboarded Pardot for them. And I went and set our first email campaign and we had good opens on that. And then every subsequent campaign we sent, I got a goose egg, 0 opens. And for anybody that's getting experience in it, like you'll see low opens or something like that. 0 is really hard to do. And on top of it all, like I knew it was isolated to Google because I was trying, the company could only sell to people on Gmail, on G Suite. And so I had a populated list of people that were on that I could send to other people on other different platforms, stuff like that, had no problem. Make a very long story short, I ultimately, by some miracle, got in touch with a support person at Google that was actually going to listen to me and give me the time of day. And come to find out, the latest update to their spam algorithm was blocking everything sent by Pardot. And they actually acknowledged it. We're like, yep, you caught a bug. We went and fixed it. And then all of a sudden it all worked again. But These are the types of things, whenever you're doing email marketing, that you've got to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And like I said, it is constantly changing.
No, good points, Jason. Sorry, I realized I had muted myself. Um, I remember when that happened. I remember you explaining that one to me and going, "What, really? That happened?" Now that's a one in a million. It's probably not going to be, if you're getting a lot of those, it's probably not going to be Google. But yeah, let's quickly go over just how to avoid the client blacklist. These are usually are good ways and good practices that you can do to make sure that you're not going to be on one of the spam houses list there. And then we'll quickly jump into how to protect your domain reputation.
Well, just take one step back when you think about how to get your messages delivered. So I've been an executive at several companies, and I get a lot of unsolicited messages from BDRs, SDRs, and so on, trying to sell me something. And I got to say, I actually read them, and I talk to my other C-suite colleagues. They read them too. So there should not be any kind of like stigma for not sending these messages. They actually get read. Most of them get deleted. And so here's why. It's because they're not relevant. They're not personalized. They don't address a pain point. And you could tell they're using some sort of marketing automation tool to just do a pulse check to see if I'm alive and then try to schedule a meeting. So the way you get past that is you personalize it. The best messages address a handful of things. It recognizes that the person you're sending to has a pain point, and you recognize what that pain point is. You talk about how you could solve that pain point. And we're talking like one line here, not like a big paragraph. Nobody's going to read a long message. That's going to get deleted fast. And then proof points. How have you done this for other companies just like me? How have you solved problems for other people just like me? How much money have you saved people? How much money have you made for people? And then a clear call to action. And so when you address those 4 points inside your message, you have a much more personalized message, which tends to get read more and not deleted real fast. So then what happens on the back end, the recipient server sees, okay, this message was actually read. Some person might even clicked on the call to action inside it. All that gets taken into account so that your future messages don't go straight to bulk mail. I remember one time I got a message, I must have gotten put on some sort of autoresponder, and I could tell this person had never used these marketing automation tools before. I think we've all seen this. Got a message. Next thing you know, I'm getting follow-ups on a perfect schedule. And it was just like clockwork. I mean, like exactly at 6:02 p.m. when I signed up for when they got the first one. And it was so obvious, I hit delete real fast. Just be mindful not to do stuff like that. Personalize it so it takes away the risk of poor delivery. So that is the number one way.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this goes across the board. It's not just specific to email marketing, but it's marketing in general. I mean, I talk about, sort of edge cases and the arms race and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, most of this doesn't really change. Like, you need to follow best practices. So, you need to send to a clean, well-maintained list. You need to send on a regular basis. You need to send consistent volume. You don't need to, you need to segment, personalize your content. A lot of this has become, I've done this on a lot of webinars and stuff like that. Biggest things that changed after COVID hit was not really that, the rules of engagement or anything changed. It just became a lot less forgiving, a lot more unforgiving if you didn't follow the best practices. So, in particular, when it comes to like email marketing and cold outreach and stuff like that, everybody's reaction to COVID was, hey, we're going to double down on activity. We're going to send 2 or 3 times as many emails as we were, and that's going to make up for all of this other stuff that's happened. Well, guess what? Everybody else made the same decision. And so now everything's that much more noisy and crowded, and it's that much harder to get out in front of people. And because of all of that, people are a lot more savvy and sensitive to getting those types of, automated, non-customized messages and stuff like that you're talking about, Raj. And within that, they get upset by that type of thing. It turns them off versus taking the time to actually customize it, build it out, personalize it, and stuff like that. Because the other aspect of it is a lot of us wind up working at home, largely isolated. So actual human touches mean that much more than they used to. And so, like I was saying, across the board, best practices remain largely the same, even though a lot of this other stuff, shifts on you. And at the end of the day, like, it doesn't really change that much. Like, you need to personalize, you need to segment, you need to maintain, the list hygiene, you need to send out a regular schedule. I mean, one of the things that I always laugh at, especially when I'm going into a new organization, is this idea of like, ooh, are we going to like piss people off by touching them too many times or sending them too many emails? And of course, you can go that far, but actually, as far as like a deliverability standpoint and stuff like that, the worst thing you can do is email somebody like once a month or once a quarter or something like that, because your recipient, as well as the gatekeepers like Google, will treat those as if it's your first cold email every time you send one. And so staying on a regular cadence and schedule is actually one of the best things that you can do.
I'll share one other story. So I was in one of my companies that I worked with. Me and probably 3 or 4 of my other C-suite peers got the exact same message from somebody at a large company trying to get their account to renew, and we weren't responding. And I happened to be in the lunchroom one day. I said, I keep getting this message from this guy. Oh my God, I'm getting the same message. I'm getting the same message. And so when we started trading notes that we were all getting spammed by the same person trying to sell us something, this is a large company trying to sell us stuff, we blocked him. And so you have to be mindful. Do not send the same thing to everybody, just hoping that there's going to be a pulse on the other end somewhere. You need to be mindful about how you attack it. And so, so if there's anybody that was thinking, well, how do I send to all these big, huge lists that I've got? You really got to personalize your message. Just think of yourself in the recipient seat. What would you like to get?
Yeah, the other thing that, again, this is best practices that most people have heard and stuff like that, but content is absolutely king. So, and this is one of the easiest and best ways to address, how do you actually get out in front of and get the attention and response from, people that, this is cold outreach too. So if you jump straight into a sales pitch, especially if you're doing an undifferentiated sales pitch, blanket across multiple people at an organization, that's going to blow up in your face real fast in a lot of different ways. Versus if you start sending them value add content that is actually valuable and they're going to consume and be grateful for getting, and then you can track engagement off of that, and you can drive them to, top of the funnel form fills like, an ebook or a webinar or something like that, that again is going to be a soft touch and value add and stuff like that. So that you've worked them through this path and this journey, and they've got familiarity with you and they understand your brand, and that you're a thought leader in the space and stuff like that. And only at that point do you then start doing, that actual, sales, product focused outreach. That's going to, one, make you a whole lot more successful, but it's also going to help minimize the issues of blowback and stuff like that if you lead with value add content and stuff that they're going to find valuable, as opposed to leading with an ask, especially if it's a sales related ask.
Yeah, absolutely. Love all the thoughts that you guys have been sharing. We're going to go ahead and jump into the Q&A. So I know we got through a lot of the discussion and we've got quite a few questions in there right now. So I'll go ahead and ask this one that we got in. In general, is it better to send from regular Outlook as opposed to tools like HubSpot and Outreach?
I can take a first pass at that. I'm sure you've got a lot to add to it, Raj. It all depends on what you're trying to do.
That's actually, that's my answer. That's it. It depends on the intent. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're one sending from, a personal inbox, whether it's outreach, email, whatever, you're limited in how much you can do that. You're also relatively limited in how you can, customize things, add in, stuff that's gonna pull from, other fields or, details that you have in your CRM or your marketing automation platform. Your ability to track and report on what you're sending and what you're doing is going to be limited. On the flip side, though, especially if you're sending just like a simple text email, your audience is small. you've got a customized message, stuff like that, then yeah, you're typically better off sitting from your own inbox, and then sequencing tools like, the Outreaches and Sales of the world that I mentioned are a way to sort of balance those two. Those emails will go out from your inbox, but you can send them in batches. You can do, personalization within it, where you've got merge tags to pull in, like first names or company names, stuff like that. So it just really depends on what your use case and what your goals are.
And so what I will share with you some of the top performing pieces of content that you can share. As Jason mentioned, content is the key to getting into the, and not just to the inbox, but to get them aware of your product. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to just deliver the message. You want it to land on non-deaf ears, okay? So here's what I've found to work really well. One is something that's going to help them do their job or solve their particular problem, maybe save them money, do things faster, things like that. If you catch somebody when they've just joined a company, especially at a senior level, they were probably brought in to either improve things, make changes, whatever those kinds of things might be. That's a really good time to catch somebody. So if you are watching when someone has changed jobs, that's a really good thing. And sales intel, the really cool part about it is you get lots of this type of information from the software there. The other things is send trending information. And what I mean by trends is if you have something about your product, service that people would want to know about so that it can impact their business, like a trend that you see in the industry, that's something that the C-suite pays attention to. So when you send it, do not send a follow-up that says, did you receive my email? They got your email, they're blowing you off. And so what's happening is they're just starting to see you as the other 250 emails they get every single day from other people trying to, like sell them products. So the way you differentiate it is, as Jason's pointed out, send something that they're going to actually want, that's going to help them onboard more people faster, those other kinds of things. I'll also share with you one. I know it's a very long answer, and I apologize. There's a lot of tips here. There's one question I ask that really helps shape other conversations, and that is, how many people are you planning to hire in the next 12 months? This is a question that, regardless of what industry you're in, you can almost always find something to talk about after that, because the follow-up to that would be, what needs to change for you to make that happen? And so this gets people thinking about, well, if you're selling something related to HR products, well, what do I need to do to scale that? If you're selling accounting services, what do I need to do to scale that? If you're opening multiple offices, and you're selling IT services, what can I do to help them with those conversations? So follow up accordingly. And what does this all mean? It means you're personalizing your entire delivery. This is not a batch and blast process. So hope that answers probably too many questions that weren't asked.
Hey, it's okay. That's why I'm here, to keep you guys on point. So we also have a couple of questions around domains. We always hear these ones when they come in. Is it worth creating a new domain and email address in case prior colleagues have done it wrong and we are now on spam list? So I'll take that one, because we also I'll take that. Not I'll answer it. But also, if you suspect you might have deliverability issues, what are some strategies to recover? So basically, what happens if your domain reputation tanks? What happens if it's bad? How do you guys, what would be your strategies for how do you do the pulse checks and fix it?
Yeah, so first off, I hear this all the time. It used to be the practice back in the early days of marketing automation of, hey, we don't care who we send to. If our domain gets tanked, we're just going to go spin up a new domain and start sending from that. It'll be no big deal. The reality is now it is harder than ever to warm a domain and an IP. And you got to be very careful about how you do that. If you do something to kill that in the very early days, it is virtually impossible to recover that. So the idea that I'm going to be cavalier with this and just go spin up a new domain and we'll start from scratch, those days are long gone. Which then of course segues into what do you do if you've broken it? One quick aside on that. One thing that I do like to do as a best practice especially if you're early on and you've not already built your domain reputation and your sending cadence and all of that. Spin up a dedicated email domain to send from for marketing purposes, so that if and when you inevitably do something to damage your deliverability, it doesn't affect the deliverability of all of the other individuals at your organization. Of course, if you get too far down that road, that becomes a really, really painful process to try and switch over, because again, you're warming and getting communication out from a brand new domain, and that's a heavy lift. As far as how to repair that, the single most effective thing that I have found if you wind up in a hole is, and this is where it's really important and valuable to have a marketing automation tool. You can go in there and you can build a list, and you can say, hey, in this list, I only want people that have opened an email from us in the last 30 days or whatever your time period is. And then until you get things fixed, you only send to that list of people that have recently opened and engaged with your content. So back to that idea of there are multiple layers to deliverability. While Google and company, while even your organization may now be marketing everything that you send as spam, the fact that your individual inbox, you have opened and engaged with those emails and that content in the past, will mean that it's more likely that those emails are going to miss spam for you individually. And then the more that you're opening, clicking, stuff like that, then that sends those positive signals back and will allow you to ultimately recover that reputation.
Yep. You heard it here, folks. Some definitely good places to check into. All right. A lot of the other questions that I'm seeing in here have to do with the level of personalization, and these are great questions because it's hard to personalize a large list of people because that's not scalable. But then you don't want to go too broad as well. So I'd love to hear your levels of personalization, and really as that applies to a sales motion, which is where you're trying to send to many people there, and then as a marketing motion where you're trying to get your message out.
I'm going to stick to the note of personalizing it as much as possible. I know it's a little bit more work, but think of all the time you're spending now not getting any responses, and just maybe try it out with, say, 100 emails and see how it would work in terms of your response rates. I have received back messages from unsolicited emails to senior VPs at the top 5 US banks, because the message was well crafted and it included those 4 points. It was personalized, addressed their pain point, because I researched what things they were trying to do and mapped that over to the products that we were selling and how we've been able to do that for other organizations. That clearly hit a pain point. And so I was able to get a response back, set up a meeting, closed a large deal. That happens repeatedly if you personalize your message. So as Jason mentioned, if the intent though is to send out to people you already know, if the intent is to send out marketing messages, you can certainly do that. Send out your guides and other things that you've been creating for content. But in terms of the initial reach, if that's the question, make it personalized. You're gonna have much better luck. And I know it's more work. Sorry, it's not the answer you might want, but that's the answer.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, the more you personalize, the better. The more likely it is to be received well. You get a response, stuff like that. One thing that I try and follow as a rule of thumb is, a reverse pyramid or whatever you want to call it. So, at the highest level where you're going to typically have the largest audience and it's the broadest reach, also the furthest up the funnel. Start with broad segmentation, so you can segment broadly around things like industry or geography or firmographic things like company size, stuff like that, use cases, where that's going to be broadly interesting to most people at any of those organizations. And then as you start narrowing down and trying to drive people further down the funnel, then you may start personalizing based off of things specific to that company, or things specific to that persona or title. And then all the way down to, hey, this is highly targeted sales, person-to-person outreach. where you really want to try and target as best you can to that individual person. So, did they just start a job hunt, to hire somebody within their department? Did they just switch, positions? Did they just raise around, really, really specific things, or even all the way down to like, hey, holy crap, we went to the same college. You sort of whittle your way down based off of, where you are targeting wise, how broad the audience is, how specific you are. Because like at those really high broad levels, like you may not know exactly which companies you need to be talking to. So that may be part of your qualification. You're trying to gauge like, I think this company fits my profile, but I'm not sure we can actually sell to them. Versus getting further down, like you've already done a lot of that qualification, so it warrants that time and effort to personalize it.
Absolutely, Jason. And I'll go ahead and jump onto that because we've had a couple of questions come through of how do you approach potentially 5 targets at the same company? How do you know who that decision maker is? Or how do you identify the direct domains and nomenclatures for all of this? And well, the easy answer, because of where I am, you can partner with data providers like Sales Intel. We've got 95% accurate data. We test all of the emails and it goes through. So those are great places to start if you're trying to find elements and if you want to expedite your prospecting. And if you guys want to learn more about that, please, there will also be an option to learn more about what it is that we do in your recap. We'll be more than happy to jump into all of those. But for the interest of the topic, we'll go ahead and move on to another question. We've got a good one in here about do automated kickback responses have any negative impact on deliverability and sender reputation? So I'm going to assume that means like the out of office replies that just say, hey, sorry, I'm not here, or any other kind of soft bounce.
I'm not aware of anything with regards to that. I mean, of course, that's virtually impossible for you as a sender to be able to know ahead of time.
Yeah, to my knowledge, I don't know of any other thing. Just to add on to one of the prior questions about who do you target, I would look at who your ideal client profile is, your ICP, your buyer persona, and look at the customer journey and see what things they would be asking at various parts of the journey before they make a buying decision about your product, and start there. Start with the ideal client profile. So if you're targeting a chief marketing officer, a chief revenue officer, VP of sales, or whatever the exact target would be, that's who you want to reach first, and then you can start penetrating wider from there. So that's just a little add-on.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple more questions about domain reputation. I love this one. My company started bulk sending before we knew about any of this. I'm afraid we might be blacklisted. How can I check, and how can I reverse or remove myself from the blacklist? And I'll go ahead and start with that one. It depends on who you're sending from. So are you sending from Gmail or Microsoft Office or there? Because they have different protocols for how you get off of those lists.
Yeah, in fact, in the guide that you should look at, there's a list of services where you can type in your domain, you can type in the IP address you're sending from, and it will tell you whether you are on one of those blacklists. So that's one way to do it. It looks like the response there was HubSpot. So HubSpot will be very quick to let you know if you're sending or not. They will shut you off and send you a note saying your message has been blocked from sending further because of too many this, that, or the other thing. They're pretty fast with that. And the reason is, as a former ESP manager, or like I used to run an ESP, they have to be on top of this. If they're not on top of this, their IP addresses will get put onto Spamhaus and other places, and it is a nightmare to get it off. So they do everything they can. The moment they detect that there's a potential problem with a list, and one of those things could be, did they get spam reports? Did they get too many bounces? There's a whole array of things that could happen. If they start detecting those, they will instantly put it on hold. In fact, as an ESP, you can get yourself on something called an FBL, which stands for feedback loop with Gmail. So the moment someone gets their email and they click report spam, the ESP actually gets notified. And so, what they're watching for is to make sure that the ESP is taking action on that client, not simply unsubscribing that one address. Because the way ESPs view it is that if one person reported spam and another person reported spam, there's something shady about your practices. It's not just that, oh, let's take this person off the list and just keep doing the same practices. So they're trying to change behavior. Not just get somebody off of a list who's complaining.
Yeah, absolutely. We also had an element of I create a new domain, a totally different to the current one, and I vary my IP address via VPN. Is there anything else I can do to separate the new domain for the old? Sounds like he's done a pretty good job.
I've never played with a VPN when it comes to sending. Have you, Raj?
No, I mean, so there's two types of blocking, right? There's multiple types of blocking, but one of them is IP-based blocking, and that is if one IP address consistently sends messages that get reported as spam. So then that IP gets put onto these blacklists, spam mouse being the biggest one. The other one is domain reputation, and as we talked a little bit about earlier, there was a time when people would say, oh, I don't care, I'll just use this ESP for a while, send to it, I know I'm sending spam. That gets blocked. They just take their list, they move on to another person because the blocking was done by IP. So these people who run these block lists got smart about it and said, wait a minute, it looks like we're seeing the same domains actually start to do the blocking, do the spamming. So they started blocking by domain, and hence a domain reputation became a big thing. So if you're using a tool like HubSpot or some of these other ones, you should be, they're whitelisted. They send tons of messages, so they you should be able to get it through. In terms of, I see a note here about contacts, getting contacts from Sales Intel and loading them into HubSpot. So watch the practice here. If you're sending messages, again, it can be personalized delivery. If you're sending bulk messages, the same message to an organization that hasn't heard of you, doesn't have a relationship with you, at that point, if a bunch of people inside the company start saying, whoa, this is spam or something, that may result in a block company-wide. So there's best practices again. So things that you got to watch for. And if you didn't know about these tactics beforehand, unfortunately, Google, Gmail, like Outlook, they're not really forgiving for not knowing. So how do you get off? You do what Jason suggested. That is the best way, which is who opened it in the past, send only to them. Who clicked in the past, send only to them. Then what they see is like, oh, okay, you sent 80 messages and 75 of them got open. You're pretty good. And you just do that repeatedly and you get in good graces again. So that's the way to get it solved. There is no magic bullet for any of this stuff.
No,
and what we're telling you today might be different in 6 months. That's how fast it changes. So
we'll just get you guys back and we'll do it all again. So we have a couple more questions because I know a lot of us, we've gone way over time, but I love all the conversation that we're having. Does the naming convention make a difference in email deliverability? In other words, are emails from a business email less likely to be considered spam?
Not sure.
I've not seen a difference.
Yeah.
I've not seen a difference.
I thought so on that one too, because whether you're sending from an @Gmail or an @Hotmail or an @yourcompanyname.io, it really goes back to how you're sending, and that really impacts the spam, not necessarily what your name is. Although if you have previously bad history with that domain, then you might have to go down those rabbit holes that we talked about of cleaning that back up.
There's certain addresses, I will just add one thing. There's certain addresses you probably should never send to. Anything that starts with info @ admin @ these are what they call role-based accounts. So that's a big thing.
Sorry, say that one more time, Raj. That don't send to info @ accounts.
Yeah, like if you get an email address that's like, oh, my email is info @ something, don't send it.
Yeah.
Don't send it.
Well, and a lot of the ESPs will put blockers up and try and prevent you, or at least make you jump through hoops before you can send anything that's a generic, email address like that.
I'll tell you what we used to do. Okay, it's a little inside secret. All right. So what we used to do is when someone would upload a list to us, we would scan for stuff like that. And if we spotted a whole bunch of info ads, marketing ads, stuff like the sales ad, we would shut them down before they could send a single message.
Yeah, another little aside. I'm virtually certain that I was responsible for Pardot adding a little checkbox whenever you did an import that you weren't going to do that type of stuff, because I think it was like a week or two after we bought Pardot. I mean, this was a long time ago. We went and pulled a list, and the list was nothing but generic email addresses like that. We
Yeah.
loaded in like 50,000 of them, and it was like
Yeah.
the next week that box showed up on there.
Yeah.
One other thing that we've not mentioned, we'd be remiss to not mention on here, is the vital importance of making sure your DNS and verification records are properly configured. So that's DKIM, SPF, and DMARC. That is, apart from sending to, blacklisted, or getting blacklisted, sending to, track email addresses, getting marked as spam, stuff like that. Not having your verification configured properly is the quickest way that you're going to damage things.
Awesome. All right. A few more questions that will slide in here before we cut this off at 2. I really like this question because I would love to hear both of your opinions on it. We come across email marketing tools that claim to be different, AI-powered, algorithm-based, wherein personal emails are sent to recipients one at a time. Is it good to manage the spam filters set at different levels? So a couple of things to unpack there.
I'm not, I would be interested to know which platforms they're talking about specifically, but regardless of whether it's going out in, I mean, so one, from a technology standpoint, the only way I can imagine they're accomplishing anything like what they're talking about would be basically doing the same thing that any of the sequencing tools are doing, which is they're going in and they're OAuthing through your email provider, and then they're actually in an automated fashion sending emails from your inbox itself. And each of those emails are a individual one-off email. There are limits to how much you can do that on a day-to-day basis, because again, it's those same limits you have internally of manually sending an email from your inbox. And that's not going to, while deliverability is typically higher sending through a sequencing tool from an individual's inbox than it is, sending from a marketing automation tool like a HubSpot. It's not gonna be a game changer. So, and again, it's all a matter of like what you're trying to accomplish. Like if you're trying to send, a content piece out to tens of thousands of people, it ain't gonna work.
If I understand the question correctly, and I think I do, but might not be, but the AI powered part of it, I've seen some of these email marketing tools advertise themselves that way too. And the ones that I'm familiar with claim that what they do is watch when a recipient is going to open a message, and then for future sends, they try to send it around that time, thinking that that's the ballpark time that they tend to open messages. So in some cases that works, but look, these are like little games and tricks that people start playing now and then then the recipient servers catch on, and then they build, it's a cat and mouse game. So at the end of the day, just send stuff people would want to read, and that's how you get through. I mean, that's what Google talks about for getting ranked on SEO. It's like post stuff people want to read, so it's the same kind of concept. I think there was one other question there about that when we were talking about the info ad addresses, and I think it was a twist, if I read that correctly, that should you send from an address that was info at? No, send it from your email, a personal email, because the recipient servers, if they start getting stuff from a role-based email, will tend to put that in either spam or they'll put it in one of the other folders like updates or forums or promotion. Send it from your email.
Raj, how do you handle that, or what's your best advice on bulk emails going out from the company?
From a company?
Yeah. So like if it's a, like hey, we're going to share out this, the ebook that we just did, and it's going out from the company and it's going wide to, 50,000 people. Obviously it's going to be a little odd to get that from, Jason at
Yeah.
Astronomer.
Yeah, that's okay. That's the one caveat. So what I was referring to was the initial email for the initial outreach. Like if you're doing a sales email, an SDR, a BDR type of email, that one should not come from a generic address. The other ones, like the newsletter and so on, those I've seen many of those work very successfully from the generic accounts. Probably one of the most popular has an envelope address of do not reply because they don't monitor anything that comes back to it. But those will work. Yeah, but that's typically, again, once you start to have that relationship with somebody and have given them content that they like and that they consume, then you can continue sending them. There's also this big some people think a bigger list is better, and that's not always the case. It's the list that gets read that's better. It's the messages that get read. So again, it's not always the list. Very rarely is the list. It's the actual messages you're sending that are typically causing issues. That's what I've seen time and time again.
All right. Both of you or one of you, 60 seconds or less, because we got 2 questions around this.
Yeah.
What is the future of email marketing?
Okay, so my former company used to publish the email marketing metrics report. It used to be like one of the biggest reports on the web. Email is around. It is still going to be around. Any rumors that email is on its way out are completely false. It is the #1 app on the internet, and I think as far as I can see down the future, it's going to stay there. It's got a $40 ROI. So every dollar you invest, you get about $40 back. Under 60 seconds.
Under 60 seconds. I love it. All right.
Yeah, I don't know that I've got a lot to add as far as where it's going. I mean, the technology has, you see new features and stuff like that, tweaks and stuff like that, but the biggest jumps that have happened were, the democratization of marketing automation, which started happening, 10 or so years ago. And then the entrance of the sequencing tools to sort of play that middle ground between an individual's inbox and a marketing automation tool. That one came on the scenes 5-6 years ago. Within those though, like, you're still segmenting, you're still, bringing in, merge elements from your database, the underlying tech and the philosophies and the strategies haven't really shifted a whole lot. It's just, tweaks into, how you can do it and strategically where you would deploy those.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's, like you guys have said, there's no silver bullet to this. There's no end all be all. It's constantly moving. It's constantly changing. The best thing you can do, know your best practices and watch it. Keep an eye on it. What's changed? Where is it going? Why did it bounce? Why did I come back? Oh, this one got great opens. Why? Asking all of these questions on a consistent basis will just create an overall thriving email marketing channel and increase your overall deliverability. So with that, thank you all for joining, and for the 17 people that stuck out all the way to the end. You guys rock. Have a wonderful afternoon. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our amazing speakers today. They're online, and yes, those are their emails, so you can reach out to them. Again, thank you, and thank you both for being here and sharing your expertise. Really loved hearing everything that you had to say, and hope we can do this again sometime.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys.
Goodbye.